Hello, welcome to the show. My name's Adam Holmes. I am a songwriter and a coach from Edinburgh in Scotland. I'm also a dad to a little 7-year-old blender without a lid called Rosa. In my creative career so far, I've built 500,000 followers. I've made 8 albums of my own. I've produced dozens of albums for other people. Some of those albums were up for BBC Award nominations. My songs have featured extensively on BBC movies, BBC TV shows, on the radio. I've had songs in the likes of Outlander and Hallmark movies, and I now coach 650 people inside of my Creative Confidence membership site. I believe that a creative life is the only life worth living. So if you're interested to learn how to live a more creatively fulfilling life, you've arrived in the right place. On this show, I'm going to be exploring the value of creativity with friends who are professional, friends who have made a living, and we're going to be discussing what it takes to live a creatively fulfilling life and why it matters that we do. If that sounds interesting, settle in and enjoy this wee episode today. Cheers. Cool. Toby, Motorhead, welcome. Thanks. Cheers for being here.
Thanks,
Did you find, how did it feel for you to become a dad, would you say, as a like the part of you that is a musician, how did it feel for you to become a dad, and do you feel, if you feel comfortable, like sharing a little bit about how you became a dad, that story and stuff?
Well, I guess I could start with saying it was a big surprise.
Right.
It wasn't planned, and I was quite young.
I'm the same.
Yeah. So it was something that came out of the blue, and I was working in a bar. I was playing a bit of guitar. I wasn't an established musician. I was very much learning my craft, and I was into it, and I was dreaming.
And you're what age at this point?
23, 24, you know.
Wow.
I was just on the scene, you know.
Yeah.
My daughter's almost that age now, you know. Yeah.
It's amazing.
It's strange to think. So my partner and I became pregnant it was an accident, but it was something that, you know, she'd had a diagnosis of an issue she'd had, an internal issue, and she'd been told unequivocally by a doctor that there was no prospect of having children.
No way.
So that's how we conceived, because she mentioned this to me, and I was like, well, we don't need to use any protection then. So, and the next thing you know,
wow, that's crazy. So talk me through, you find out, can you remember the moment where you found out she was pregnant, what you were doing, and what
she'd said, can we meet for a chat? And so we went for a chat, and so I went over to her place, and she was highly stressed out. And she could barely explain to me what the issue was. And I was like, what's going on? Because we were, we were good pals. And
how long had you guys been together at this point?
We'd maybe known each other for a year.
Okay.
But we'd been together for much less than that.
Yes. Yeah.
So it was unexpected. But
I had no idea about this, dude. This is a complete parallel, so it's interesting.
Yeah. So she managed to get the words out, and I was just listening and taking it in. And you know, in these moments where you don't know how you're going to react, in that moment, I was extremely calm and empathetic.
Right.
And I could see how stressed she was. And I also knew her backstory.
Yeah.
So in that moment, without any consideration, I was just like, went into pacifying and calming mode. And then I was like, why are you crying? Why are you freaking out? She's like, you can just go if you want, and that's it, and I'll just deal with it. And I was like, I've not even said anything, you know. I was like, give me a chance. So I said, what do you want to happen here? I was like, do you want to have a kid, and what, should I move in and we'll have a go at raising a kid? And she was like, do you want to do that? And I was like, well, what are the options, you know? Either I walk away or we give it a go, you know?
Right.
I was like, I can see you're upset. Maybe we should at least give it a try. Yeah. And if it works, then that's great.
Had you met her family at this point? Did you know anyone from her family, or was that all kind of, were you
I don't know if I'd met them yet.
Not as a like,
but they're
son-in-law.
But they're lovely, as it happens.
Right.
So that wasn't an issue.
Yeah.
The issue was that we as two parents had built our house on the sand.
Yes.
On an emotional, loving, long-term, you know. So that became the issue down the line, because, as you'll know, when you conceive a child, you start the process of your mind changes, the woman's body certainly changes, and your mind changes as a
I
person.
think they say that your chemistry actually changes as a man.
That's what they say, yeah. You
Yeah.
start seeing things differently. Certainly, you have a few epiphanies during that 9 months where you're waiting for the child to come, and you start thinking about the world differently.
Right.
And you are forced to reflect upon your own childhood and your past and everything you've been through.
Yep.
And for me, it was a period of reconciliation with myself and my past, coming to terms with a lot of things and accepting what was coming ahead and preparing for that. And then to cut a longer story short, you know, we had the child and went through, we stayed together for about 3 years.
Yeah. Big achievement.
It was tough, yeah. I'm not going to lie, it was quite tough. And and it didn't work out for us, and so we called it a day, and then...
Or like it worked out in a way that wasn't what you thought of as success, but it's like at some point it's like, well, if we have a kid who's like mentally stable and loved and is going between two homes
Sure.
reasonably happily,
once that was
a
established,
success,
right?
right?
the initial breaking up of the home and going and living on my own and having a very young child and learning to be a single dad was a very tough transition.
Brutal,
and I was kind of heartbroken about that. And I spent 6 months living in a tiny box room.
Yep.
And I kept a journal to get through that. And I had some good friends around, and over time it got easier. And
what role did music play during that time, during that particular season?
So music was kind of a solace, like a place I could put my confusion about the situation, and it gave me a place to be where I stopped thinking about negative things, or it gave me an outlet for negative things.
Right, a reason to have them.
Yeah,
almost.
like a place to put them, and then I could share them, and other people might find some relation to it. And but at that time, I wasn't accomplished in any way, I don't think, in music. But I was always creating things and learning. And actually, somebody I lived with at that time in the shared flat I was in, the only room that was available was this little box room. And when you walked in the door, the ceiling immediately slanted down. It was at the back of one of those Edinburgh tenements.
Yeah.
So you walked in and you were immediately like that. So all you could do was go in there and dive
You're
into
like,
bed.
this is a cupboard.
Yeah, it was a cupboard. Little mattress on the floor and a little tiny
You're like
window.
a Harry Potter here.
So I'm sort of sitting cross-legged in this mattress, like writing things, you know. And in that house, the rest of the house was very nice, so I spent a lot of time in the kitchen. And in the kitchen was a lovely lass, Linda, who was a great friend and great support. And she saw me being the way I was, and she said, you know, you're always reading stuff and you're studying and you're so studious, you know. You should go to uni. And I was like, no, I'm not going to uni.
I'm not that guy.
I'm not going to uni. I'm going to figure it out myself, you know.
Right.
She was like, look, if you're, like, I get that you're rebelling against your dad and that, but you can study. She's like, an undergraduate is 4 years. And if you went and studied what you're into, that's 4 years to do that. It could be really good for you.
Yeah.
So
Time to spend in the activity, meeting other people who are doing it. And
so she planted that seed.
Cool.
And I came around to the idea, and once I'd established my new single life as a single dad and whatnot, I realised that I have the weekdays are mine, and then the weekend I'm a dad.
Right.
And how am I going to use that time?
Yeah.
So I thought, all right, maybe studying is a good thing to do. So I had a job and a part-time job, and I looked into, there was a thing called an ILA, which gave me a grant to get access to university studies. So I studied for 1 year to get the qualification to go to university, because at this point, I think I was in my late 20s and I was considered a mature student, so I needed to get that qualification.
Right.
So I got 500 quid to pay for that year study, which actually took place at Edinburgh Uni and was a really inspiring year for me to learn how to, to learn to remember how to write an essay and how to do the annotations and stuff you have to do for, you know, when you're writing essays at uni, how to learn how to be a student.
Right.
So that was really inspiring, and we were doing philosophy and sociology and politics and all these things, that, like classical literature and all this great stuff. So we started off with Homer's Odyssey, and I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
So I
And like, how did it feel it must have felt like a real mix of different people in terms of like, I mean, I worked on building sites and you'd be with one particular type of person really on there, right? And then I can imagine, I never went to uni, but I can imagine that for someone like yourself, that you'd find yourself mixing with all sorts of different kinds of folks maybe.
Yeah, that's true. Certainly on the Access course, it was a range of people of all ages and different backgrounds. And the tutors were really interesting, enthusiastic guys that were, quirky philosophy teachers.
Yeah.
So that was a really great experience. And then going to university, I was one of the two mature students who commenced that degree, which was popular music at Napier.
Even though you're 27 or something at the time, right?
Yeah,
so,
yeah. And of those two mature students, one of them dropped out after a year or two, and then the rest of my peers were kind of people who'd left school and gone to uni, or had maybe taken a couple of years and then gone to uni. So there was a wee bit of an age gap, but not an astronomical one. But definitely enough for me to not want to be in the student union banging £1 shots on a Wednesday night.
Right.
I was like, I want to be home practicing myself.
Yeah, I want to make the most of this opportunity in a way. And like once you are, it's not 27's like you're a kid really, but you're old enough to know I'm going to use this. And
I
make
was
the most
so
of it.
happy to get on that degree. I mean, I think some of the other students were at that age where they were like, what am I doing? Maybe is this right for me? I've just, whereas for me, I'd been self-teaching myself music for a decade, and I'd gotten to where I'd gotten to.
What exactly was the course, by the way? You
Popular music degree.
Popular music degree. Cool,
yeah, that's
cool.
So there were two main sort of types of music degree. There was a classical one or a popular music.
Do you notice a divide between people who are like, I never learned anything, I'm self-taught, or people who are like, I'm educated? How did you find navigating?
Well,
I
was self-taught, and I was supposed to, in order to get on the degree, I had to get the qualification, but then I had to go for an interview. And there was more people wanted places than there were places.
Right.
So it was competitive to get in.
Yeah.
And you go into this big room. It was a beautiful sunny day in this big room, and it was at the old campus that was like Hogwarts.
Right.
Out in Morningside,
Yeah.
So it was a beautiful, inspiring old stone building on a hill.
Yeah.
With a view of Edinburgh, And you go into this room for an interview, and there's a panel of music teachers of all different disciplines there.
You're like Hagrid was there even.
It was like going to Hogwarts, yeah, exactly.
God.
And you want to get in, and you're supposed to be grade 5, like official grade 5, and I'm grade 0.
Yeah,
I'm just blagging it. So I went.
You're
in
a white belt. You're going in there.
I was just blethering, and I was just like way over enthusiastic. And after a short while, one of the teachers was like, "Toby, calm down. We like you.
Yeah.
You're all right. Just calm down."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Okay, I'll get together." I needed them to know that I was like, I need to be here.
De Niro used to say, he was always asked like for acting advice, right? And he would say, just don't do anything. Because the temptation, right? In the moment when you're feeling whatever, you feel tempted to like, I'm really going to give it some now. He says, just don't do anything, right? That's
good advice.
And in that kind of like moment where you're being evaluated, you're literally, that's the thing. I did a few competitions when I was younger, and it is a funny feeling to be literally judged. Like it does. Did you ever feel like that colored your experience of performance in any way? Like to know that that's a possibility?
Yeah, it did. Over the course, this is jumping ahead a bit, but over the course of the 4 years, you're continually assessed,
right,
and judged. And to varying degrees of success. So I would work. I did work quite hard on some of my projects. Not all of them, but
the ones you were interested in.
I put a lot into some aspects of that course, and I didn't necessarily always see the rewards.
Yeah.
And that felt really bad. One of my final hand-ins...
Tell me more about that. Elaborate.
Well, so in my final year, it all builds up to this final year, kind of your main projects in a few fields. It sort of it starts off really broad, and then it gets narrowed down, and then you've got 3 main hand-ins, And one of them is your big submission, And for me, I chose to do this thing where I reached out to other universities, and I connected with a filmmaker. After many meetings and many emails to various campuses, I found a filmmaker that I clicked with, and we worked on a collaborative project. So he was making a short film that was a musical, a zombie musical as it happened, and he was really into horror. Mm-hmm. And he wanted me to write the music for it. So we met up, and we were both really into cinema and particularly horror movies. So we geeked out, and we formed a bond. And he was just, a student like myself. So we collaborated on this thing. We put a cast together. We got a film crew together. We made this thing. I wrote 4 main songs for the 4 main characters. Wow. Each with a different style of music. Forcing myself to write in things that I'd never done before. One of the songs was even a collaboration with someone which I'd never written with anyone outside of myself. And another one was just an instrumental that was for a slasher, slash and grab scene. So it was a really exciting project for me. Got me out of my comfort zone, and I got to use all the skills I'd developed over time to put into it. And we realized the production and completed it, and I was able to submit, my write-up of this process of not only creating the music as a sort of like, I get hired with a brief and I sit and write. I was involved in the production, and we worked side by side, and I worked with the actual cast and like spent time with each of the people, talking to them about the intention of the song, the delivery, and all of this, and these were people from musical theatre background,
right,
which I'd never worked with before.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like a musical production assistant, or I don't know what the name would be for that role, a musical director or something like this.
It's a funny one with film because it's so collaborative, right?
Yeah.
In a way that I know that you have, we can talk about that more, but I know you have experience in film and theatre even, and it's difficult sometimes to explain to people who've only been involved in music just how collaborative film is, and where a role sort of begins and ends, isn't it? It's like very much like we made a film a couple of years ago, and it felt it's more like being on a building site than making a record.
Yeah, it's a grind,
it's
right?
a
If you're actually on set,
it's a grind, yeah.
So just to wrap up that story. So Ryan McHenry was the director of the film, and he completed the project. I handed it in to the university, and when I got the result back, it was an extremely low pass. So I think if the pass is 40, I think I got in the 40s. It's a shame, if you're at university and you get your numbers back, then you want to be getting above 70% for a.
But how did you feel about it?
I felt terrible. I felt great about the work I put in and the actual finished product. I was like, it's amazing. We've even seen this through with all of the hurdles and the moving parts involved, and like getting a place to shoot, getting people together, making it happen, editing it, making it work.
It's a huge,
fitting it all together. For students to pull that off, it was great. And it wasn't a piece of garbage. Like it was a good thing, And I thought, this is crazy because we did something good here. So I've obviously missed something, or they've missed something. And at the time, I thought maybe I've got this all wrong here, but I was like, But what happened was, Ryan took the short film, and it was always for him a vehicle to make a feature film. So he shopped it around the film festivals and stuff, and it grew legs, and it got some attention. And then we got a call one day, Toby, we're going through at Glasgow. We've been nominated for Scottish BAFTAs for Best Music, Best Producer, Best Director. So we went through at Glasgow, and I think we won Best Producer, and we got nomination certificates for Music and Director. Funny story was, when we were at the actual fancy venue in Glasgow where they handed out the awards, somebody came up to us in the kind of area where you're schmoozing and drinking and gave us these A4 golden envelopes with our kind of, what's essentially you've been nominated for a BAFTA certificate, kind of like a runners-up prize. Right. So the whole cast and crew were there, and when they handed us these out, I knew what was inside of it, and I just was feeling a bit cocky. So I opened up the envelope, took it out, ripped it in half, and threw it in.
Like confetti style.
I was just like, nobody talks about who came in second.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to put that on the wall.
Yeah.
But it was
Wow, that's a really awesome kind of asset to have, though. Like the sort of distance between how that was graded and then how it did in the world, right? As evidence for you to have. That's pretty cool.
For me, that was kind of the reconciliation of that process, because when the degree finished, I was pretty down by the end of it. You know,
I'm
I
not
was
surprised,
like,
yeah.
been assessed, didn't get a great result for that last hand-in.
Yeah.
I got through the degree, I completed the course, so I felt good about my staying power. And I didn't realise it yet, but in time I came to realise I learned a lot on the degree, regardless of that hand-in.
Yes.
No.
And I know film's important to you.
Yeah.
When did that? Was it watching movies as a kid?
Yeah.
When did it first come into your life as a thing that you thought, maybe I can do that? When was that?
There's actually a very specific moment, and I really like this memory. I was really young, and my parents had me when they were much younger than I was. They were teenagers when they had me.
Wow.
So they would have been in their 20s, and they're sitting in the living room, probably smoking a joint, watching Ridley Scott's Alien back in the 1980s. And I had crept down the stairs and sat at the bottom stair, and the living room door was this door that had wooden slats like that. So in the living room, they just had the TV light on, and it was shining directly at the door. So I was like behind these grills, a bit like the grills in the Alien movie, a bit where light sifts through, you know. Yeah, it's a bit like a Ridley Scott set itself. Yeah. So I'm sitting there at the bottom of the stairs, and I could only see a fraction of the screen at any one time, and I was just staring at this image, and because the film's quite a slow burner, you know. It sort of builds up in space, and there's a lot of silence, and so I'm watching this. Anyway, I move, and the stair creaks, and I get sprung. So I'm like, please let me. And they were like, okay, you can sit there and don't say anything, and if it gets too scary or you make a noise, you're going to bed, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just sat there and got to watch Alien. And I was way too young to see Alien, but props to my parents for letting me see it, because it had a massive impact on me. And
what about it? What was it? What was it?
The atmosphere of the movie is profound. I didn't understand a lot of the adult themes, and I don't know what people think about kids watching films that are adult certificate or whatever. But for me, that I didn't realize it at the time, but you know, it stayed with me, and I still watch that film to this day. And I love
Blade Runner was one like that for me, that had that same atmosphere, and I just felt like it was like there's some films that make you excited about art. You just feel like it fills your soul with oh my God, look at what humans can make together, right?
It's hypnotizing.
Absolutely.
That film, you know. And the soundtrack by Vangelis as well is just, it's completely part of that world. The visual and the audio kind of merge together. Yeah. Beautifully, you know.
And what about the acting? Because funny enough, one of my first memories of you is I can remember you walking. Do you know where Bobby's Sandwich Bar is? I remember you leaving there and walking down the road, and I kind of said hi. And I think I was probably 21 at the time, so it's a good 12 years ago or something like that. And I remember chatting with, maybe I can't remember if I just said, "Oh, you look cool," or "You have a cool jacket on," or so. It was like something like that, right? It was
always nice to get a compliment.
100%. But I don't know. I think a lot of the friendships that I have, and I think ours is no different for me, have come from just being like, I'm just going to take a chance and say, I like your jacket. Or do you know what I mean? Quite often it's just a little detail. Just something. But I remember you saying at that point, I do a bit of acting. And I just remember thinking, man, I'd love to do that. But I just felt... for me at that time, right, I was going through a lot of trauma in my life, and I just felt like, because it's such a visible profession, right, to be an actor. In a way, there's people who hide in roles as well. That's a whole other discussion. But I guess I felt drawn to your courage at that point in time, that you could kind of put yourself in that space, and I wondered why you think that is for you. What is it for you and about you that you felt like, I would like to kind of have a go at acting specifically, would you say?
Before I tried acting, I assumed I would be great at it. In my cocky, you know, mind.
It's like they say we're the perfect parent till we have a kid.
Yeah.
It's like that,
Yeah.
isn't
So
it?
it was a humbling experience to get the opportunity to do any acting, and I would use the term acting quite loosely, because
Right.
the only reason I've been fortunate enough to take part in any productions is because I happened to know some people who became writers and directors, and they knew me through my music work, and I had a certain aesthetic on stage and a persona that I'd cultivated with my band, so they knew me for that.
Right.
And they tended to hire me to be that.
Right.
So it wasn't so much as acting as just can you be that guy that you do? You
Create
know?
that atmosphere as you.
Bring
right.
that, you know. So they wanted me looking like a 1930s blues man, bringing the preacher vibes, you know.
Yes.
And I was just like, I wish somebody would hire me to be like
someone else,
a crazy person, or you know, just something.
Yeah. Why is it? I feel like all men who are interested in acting are just dying on a shot.
I want to be Jack
play
Nicholson in The Shining,
crazy,
you know.
exactly.
Here's Johnny.
100%. Yeah. Why do you think that is, by the way?
I think it's probably because overacting appears that it might be easier than underacting.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Maybe it's our idea of what acting is. Like you were saying earlier about De Niro saying, you know, when you feel like you should do something, don't. And so I think the camera is really a thing that picks up on nuance.
It's a lie detector. My brother's a director. He said it's a lie detector.
Yeah.
And that was I think the microphone is the same. Like if you're in the studio, it's like, did you ever listen to, there's the version of Moondance by Van Morrison that has all of the takes that didn't make it.
Yeah.
And you go, what is it about those takes that are they're just not the one? What is it?
I listened to that song recently on Portobello Beach on a walk. I listened to a bunch of had a Vanathon on a morning walk. I was staying in Porty recently. And that song came on, and it wouldn't be one I would pick to listen to. I like a lot of his other more obscure albums.
Yeah, it's like a standard.
Yeah, I've heard it too much.
It's like
but for some reason that day I listened to it. I think a friend of mine had said, I don't really know about Van Morrison, so I'd shared a bunch of recommendations to her, and so as a result I was listening to Van, and the Moondance came on, and I listened to it, and I just thought, it's an absolute cracker of a song. It's kind of a jazz tune.
It is.
But
It's a jazz
pop
standard.
tune. You know,
yeah. But a lot of the jazz standards were pop songs, right? That's where they all came from.
Day.
You know, and even a lot of the country songs, and like, that's one thing I always liked about the way that you put things across as an artist, is that you understand like you're deep in it.
Yeah,
I know that when I hear you play. And there's other people who you go, oh, you're trying to be. It's almost like they want to be George Ezra, and you're like, but George Ezra wants to be people who are way deeper down.
Okay.
You know, you keep going down a little. It's like maybe George Ezra wants to be Dylan, but maybe Dylan wanted to be Woody Guthrie. Maybe Woody Guthrie wanted to be Leadbelly, and it goes down and down and down. And the sense I always had when I heard you play, and even in some ways, to be honest, the way I heard you talk and be in the world, I thought that's like you've made a decision about to be that kind of person and bring that energy and kind of pull water out from that well. Where does that come from, do you think, for you?
I was, I got into music. My own music starts with Robert Johnson, you know, and that started me asking questions about, because when I heard Robert Johnson, I didn't know what a Mississippi was, you know.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So when I heard the music...
and explain to us what a Mississippi is, for those who...
Mississippi is a place.
Don't know.
Clarksdale, Mississippi. They say home of the blues, you know. Robert Johnson sold his soul to the devil at the crossroads. All of these stories, these mythologies, these things are wrapped up in this history.
Does Delta blues come from Mississippi?
Mississippi
is and just to
Delta.
clarify for people listening, Delta blues is like more guitar and a voice type. It's more raw, it's like old time is to country.
Yeah.
Delta is to maybe the modern blues. Would that be right to say?
Yeah. The Mississippi Delta is a region, and in that region, you know, you would have had a lot of sharecroppers farms and stuff, so there would have been black field workers there,
right,
living on plantations, working, singing the blues on those plantations, drinking in juke joints in Mississippi. Then you'd have itinerant travellers like, Robert Johnson was certainly one of those, you know. So Delta blues is defined by a sort of quite a raw, hard driving sound. Often slide guitar is involved.
Right.
You know, you could put Charlie Patton and Son House in that bracket, you know. And then on the outer regions of Mississippi in later time, from this well evolved things like hill country blues, which is a more hypnotic style of blues, pioneered by guys like Fred McDowell, and then taken further by R.L. Burnside and Junior Kimbrough, who went on to influence modern acts like the Black Keys. Without hill country blues, there would be no Black Keys.
No rock and roll, really. Surely, I mean,
It's in there. Rock and roll, you have to give props to gospel for.
Right.
Because there's a certain fervour in the gospel that's carried through into rock and roll and pop.
How would you
soul.
define, like, the difference in gospel, or did gospel and blues not kind of, do they not feed each other to some extent?
Their ears are not deaf to one another.
No, right.
The blues players were singing gospel, and some of the gospel people were singing the blues, but don't tell the preacher.
Got you.
You know what I mean? It was all there.
By the
it's
way,
in the
that's
air, you know?
really interesting, because I think people struggle now to imagine how radical the blues must have felt. If you were like going to church every Sunday listening to gospel, and then suddenly people are singing about drinking and sex, and
Honestly.
it must have just sounded like it's totally hip hop of...
People don't know, like, that there were preachers, right, who would like wear gigantic wings on stage at church and play an electric guitar through a valve amp that sounded like Chuck Berry on overdrive.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a guy, the two-wing
amazing.
preacher, they called him, and just...
Incredible.
Isaiah Phillips, I think his name was.
So we just did a little rejig there and had a little stretch, had a little bit of nicotine, and we're back. I think that connection between blues and gospel is interesting. What I notice about gospel music, and I don't know if you can resonate with this, is I got ill recently. I got norovirus. It's the most ill I've been for years. It was horrendous. Like I could feel my ancestors in me. It was like that bad. You know what I mean? And I had a bunch of gigs in Ireland, and I was really looking forward to them, and I had to cancel them. And so I never really watch telly these days, but I put Netflix on, and there was this kind of show set in, I think it was set in Detroit, and there was a gospel choir scene in it. And this has happened to me a few times, right? And I was watching it, I just couldn't stop crying. It was just something about the dignity in the face of such suffering that I just find so moving. And I think that seems to be something that blues shares with gospel. This kind of dignity and this decision to be in the world in a way, no matter what the world does to you, puts on you. That is something that I recognize in myself. I had a crazy upbringing. You go away in the circus. I grew up in the circus in my own way, right? I grew up in a commune, and it was a very volatile environment. I sense from you that there's stuff for you that has given you the lens on the world whereby you're like, I am going to show up with dignity and grace and intention. I sense that in you. And I think I sense it because I recognize it in myself. If that is true, if you are a man who has experienced suffering, experienced pain, and decided to respond to that in a certain way, do you think that's where the resonance with the blues comes from for you? Is there anything in that?
I think it's fair to say that no pains are equal, and so your pain is valuable to you. So of course, when as a young white kid in Linlithgow, discovering Robert Johnson, I connected and resonated with that music in my way.
Sure.
But as I grew older and learned the history of the blues and the backstory of those cultures in America that form that patchwork of musical influences and of cultural, sociological, but the background of slavery and the way religion comes into the picture and how it evolves together, it's more like a river than anything, you know. And all of that suffering that's in there, then I realize as I start to learn more about those things that I can't relate to those things directly, you know.
But what is it about you, right, that like most 14-year-olds are not banging out Robert Johnson like, Mum, you don't understand me. It might be like Nirvana, or it might be, you know, what is it for you about that music that can you remember the feeling that you had when it kind of first came to you? I was
completely hypnotized. It was I started out by saying I didn't know what Mississippi was, right? And all I had was this classic image of Robert Johnson staring at the camera in a photo booth as a young man, staring stock at the camera, playing an A7 chord. And I was looking at this kid and I was like, God, who's this young guy? Is this voice I'm hearing on here? And this slide playing. And even though I didn't understand the guitar playing yet, I could tell that like there was variation and nuance in there, and it was unlike anything I'd heard before. And I thought, I've got to learn how to do that. And his voice was just inaccessible to me. I was like, how do you sing like that, you know? I didn't even have a voice at that point. Like, I couldn't sing in tune.
Right.
So that started a long road of, first of all, I was just about the guitar, you know? I was like, just got to get that sound. But I didn't realize that he was playing in open tunings to get the sound and using a bottleneck. So it started a long road of just not being able to do it for a long time.
Right.
And in those days, it was pre-internet, so there was no, like, just go and find out about it. It was go to the library, order magazines or mail order. You had to be
committed, right?
Just had to wait.
Yeah, but that is a form of commitment,
keep banging your head against the wall. I would pick up the guitar, and I just couldn't figure it out, and I didn't have the ears yet to just hear it off the record. So I had to acquire skills, and over time I met other players. Other players would be like, you know, more advanced than me, and they'd be like, it's just one of these things. So I'd always watch them, and they'd give me too much information. They weren't really necessarily good teachers, but they would throw a bunch of stuff at you, and you would just like try to remember one move, and then you'd go away and be like, he did this thing, you know. And then you'd hear that sound that you'd heard on a record. You'd be like, that's that John Lee Hooker sound, the B string against the open E string, you know, sliding into it. That's
right, and then you start to feel like, oh my God, I'm on the inside of it. Did you ever have that feeling where if you get just like a moment,
just kicking the door open a little bit,
100%, you're like, I don't have the whole thing, but that sounds a bit like it, and then you're kind of like, wow, I'm sort of doing it a bit.
And once you've got a few of those moves under your belt, you can then start to play a little bit of blues.
How quickly were you writing your own songs after learning a few of the licks, would you say?
I was writing my own songs from the very beginning.
About what? What were those songs?
My first song was about my sister.
Really?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Because we'd, you know, more personal information, but like my parents had divorced, and me and my sister had been separated, and at that point I was leaving home. I was 17, so I left home at that point.
Yeah.
But there was a degree of trauma involved.
Yeah.
And for my sister, it was a bit harder because she wasn't old enough to leave home, and I felt bad for her, and I felt bad about leaving her. So she was on my mind, and when I picked up the guitar, it's a vehicle for all of those feelings, you know. Otherwise, where do they go, you know? So
what was the sentiment of that? Do you remember the song? Do you remember the sentiment?
All I remember is the words "send my sister," like send my sister away, you know, away from this bad situation she was in, because I felt
that's amazing. And you're 17 at this point in time. Is that right? You're 17. Yeah. It's amazing. And so you leave home at 17.
Yeah.
What happens there? Are you working, or are you just kind of?
No, initially I was just like because I was in the middle of my exams at school, and the family home kind of imploded rather violently. So I kicked my dad out for hitting my mum.
Yeah.
Physically kicked him out of the house, and then their relationship ended that night. I mean, it was like, it's crazy.
Do you think, is that the day you become a man? Is that the kind of, like, was that the feeling?
I don't think that was the moment, but it was a surreal, slightly cinematic moment in life that shouldn't happen to a kid at that age.
Yeah.
And so I was lucky that my grandparents, my mum's mum and dad, Mickey and John, they were like, come down here, get your feet under you. So I went and stayed with them. And that was always my favourite place to be when I was a kid. So I went and stayed with my grandparents for about 6 months. And they gave me 2 weeks grace, during which time my auntie handed me a guitar. And she's like, do you like it? And I was like, yeah. She's like, well, it's yours.
Wow.
You better play it, you know?
Yeah.
So that was me. I was just playing every day. So 2 weeks later, I'm playing Hank Williams, you know, and
Wow.
that was it. Like,
Love
just
Hank
nothing else
Williams.
to do
Yeah.
but play guitar. But after 2 weeks, my granddad was like, right, we've got an appointment tomorrow, so we'll be going into town. Better get you in shirt and tie because you got an interview. And he, you know...
Is he an old school dude?
Old school dude, and he and my other granddad have had a word and said, look, we've got this kid here. He's sitting about playing guitar. He needs to get a job. So they made a few calls in the town, which was my birthplace of Macclesfield.
It's like being a drug addict or something.
They were like, better get this lad on his feet.
Right.
So they made a few calls on my behalf and got me an interview at Harry Smith's Travel.
Perfect.
And got me a job as a... Basically, it was like, just show up and you've got the job sort of thing.
Do you think there's any kind of like resonance in that? Because first jobs are interesting, right? It's like...
I didn't know my ass from my elbow.
I bet.
It was a telephone job.
Uh-huh.
And in those days, as I said, there's no computers, so it was old school travel agents that was all paper based. And in the front shop there was just a desk and there'd be somebody sitting there, and then you'd go through the back shop and it was Harry Smith, his wife, and a young secretary, and then me added to the equation. I was like the young kid.
Yeah.
And then there was a little door and a steep like an Amsterdam staircase up to this loft, and in that loft was just all of the different travel books from the different companies stacked up in these massive piles. You couldn't move in the room. That's crazy. And they'd be like, go upstairs and get us the September 84, you know, and you'd have to go and get the physical thing. It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
It was totally ridiculous.
Did it make you want to travel, being in that, like seeing all these locations or something? Did it make you want to get out there? And...
I mean, I hadn't seen anywhere at that age really. I've been on family holidays.
And those were like
So we would go to France.
Right.
We'd always go to France.
Yeah.
Sometimes went to the Alps, which was amazing. I love the mountains.
Did you have a girlfriend at that time when you were 17? Did you have any girlfriends or that? When did that start for you?
I didn't. I didn't have a girlfriend, but while I was there, we went to the bowling alley one night, me and my auntie, and there was a young lass working at the bowling alley, and she caught my eye. So I plucked up the courage and went over and asked her out.
Oh my God.
And she was quite sweet. She was called April,
Right.
I remember. And
Wow.
we had a similar story. Her parents had a breakup, and so we connected over that. Once we went out on a date, we realised that. I remember going to the cinema, and I think she'd just passed her driving test. So she had a car, so she could drive us to the cinema.
Someone has a car, that's like a...
And she had dogs, and my gran had dogs, so we'd meet up. Funny story about when I'd grown in a house where my parents were pretty laissez-faire. They were wrapped up in their own troubles, should we say, at this point. So when I had, if a person came around to my house, a girl, a boy, whatever, it'd be like, yeah, send them up, just come in. So there was no fluff. My grandparents had a different ethic, but I didn't know that yet. I hadn't lived with them in this way. So April shows up at the door.
You haven't lived with anybody in another way, right? So it's...
Yeah, I'm just a kid,
Yeah.
So April shows up at the door, and I let her in. Oh, come upstairs. So we'd go upstairs, and my gran comes to the bottom of the stairs. Toby, what is it, gran? Oh, John would just like a word if you come down. Soft as you like. So I went downstairs. I walked in the living room. It's like, antiques everywhere, proper granny living room, armchairs. I walk in, and my granddad just gets out of his armchair, storms towards me, and tears me a new one, like very loudly, like really shouted at me. It was like, don't you bring a bloody young woman into this house without running it by me first, and bring her down here and introduce her properly.
Oh my God.
And I was like, I'd never been shouted at by my granddad before,
really?
so I burst into tears. So I had to go back upstairs to my new girlfriend to be like, I better come downstairs, my gran wants to meet you. I took her downstairs, I'm like red-faced. She's like, what the fuck's going on? They're sitting there. My gran's whipped up a cup of tea and some biscuits, and they're sitting there. Very nice to meet you. Do sit down. Tell us all about yourself. And I was like, this is surreal.
Yeah, you're like, I'm not trying to have a wife here. I'm 17.
Yeah.
What are you doing to me?
They were old school,
Old school. Yeah, it's fascinating. What age would they have been at that time?
Oh, God. Do the numbers. I don't know. 60s.
Christ. I saw this documentary in Ireland, and it was the Rolling Stones visiting Ireland. And there's a woman pushing like one of them kind of trolleys that you have like your messages in when you're an old lady. And she had the shawl and that, and they're interviewing people on the street. And they go up to her and they say, "Will you go and see the Rolling Stones tonight?" She goes, "Rolling Stones? I'm 40 years old, don't you know?" Right? So it shows the perception on what old was, right? I mean, you're talking about, if you sit down now with somebody, I mean, if we went to the Royal Oak or the Captains, you'd never think twice about someone being 70 and getting the crack, and it's just a totally different atmosphere, isn't it? It's very different. That generational gap, that generational divide feels very reduced now.
The world has changed dramatically in the time since my grandparents left this earth, you know, and in my lifetime. I don't know if it's just because I'm older now, but I used to remember walking through the meadows and like there was guitars and stuff happening, and I walked through today and it was just a couple of boom boxes playing bad music and just students, you know, and it's like, I think all of the students there, like how many of them are actually from Edinburgh?
None. I mean, even the UK, none. And I think a lot of it is just the universities are a business, you know, and people don't understand that. People think that they're, I don't know what people think is going on, but the unis are mega big business in Edinburgh. And I think we've lost something.
The atmosphere out there today was very different than it was many years ago in my day.
Even 10 years ago, I feel like, my mate Sonny used to say that on a hot day in the meadows, you'd look out and just be everyone doing pointless activities everywhere. It's like a guy doing.
But you used to just go there, and you knew that there'd
just
be
hang out
groups of things happening,
find stuff to do.
But it used to seem a bit wild, and there used to be more hippies and punks and cultural diversity. I went down there today, and it was just bland.
Totally.
The diversity of like a bunch of students that all look the same. No offense to those kids, by the way. It's not their fault. They're just
just kids that have been
there. But it was either that or tennis. I mean, that was the diversity I saw today. It was like, crikey.
Yeah. There's guys play Quidditch on the meadows. Have you seen that?
Well, I don't want to get cancelled by Harry Potter fans.
The Harry Potter thing's mad in Edinburgh. It's like there's a shop on Victoria Street that has nothing to do with J.K. Rowling at all. Yeah. And there's just a massive queue outside of it for people to buy like Harry Potter stuff. It's crazy.
Well, I never cease to be amazed by the stupidity of people.
Yeah, but also by the impact of Harry Potter. It's like
that's phenomenal.
It's like a biblical impact, that isn't it? It's crazy, absolutely crazy. Just to give people a little bit of background, obviously you had the Black Diamond Express. Sure. You had acting. You've always played guitar. Could you tell us a little bit about the circus stuff? I know that's a more recent thing.
Yeah, sure. So the circus job came up because I got a recommendation. I have several friends who over the years have worked for that circus company, going back many years. And I remember my friend Andy Moore actually going to the circus many years ago. And I remember seeing his posts about it on Facebook. I don't remember the year, but let's say 2010 or 2007 or way back in the day. And I remember him leaving Edinburgh, and I remember seeing him on site with all these caravans and a big circus, big top. And I just thought, it's like a Fellini movie, you know. It's like, what is that? You know, it's crazy. I think I'd seen La Strada, you know, black and white film.
Did it feel attractive to you at that
point? I mean, it's just, what is circus? If you ask someone who's never been to a circus, what is circus? It'll be, what movies about circus have you seen? That's the image of circus you have. It's this idea of clowns and jugglers and crazy acrobats. Maybe elephants and things, if you got that notion. So I had this notion of circus from cinema, and I had this notion of circus that people had ran away and ran off with the circus. Yeah. So I had this illusion of the circus, if you will. But anyway, by recommendation, I got a nudge from someone saying, "Do you want to run away with the circus? Because there might be a job available." And somebody,
do you think they have to say that every time they have someone to join?
Well, for me, it was the first time I'd ever had the chance to say it, so it was a
beautiful
opportunity. Yeah. But so that came about, and I was at a point in my life where I'd been doing some gigging and some teaching and things, but actually, you know how as a creative in Edinburgh, as a musician particularly, in January and February, it's Deadsville, you know, and so it was slim pickings, and I got this call at that time of year. I'd just come out of a long-term relationship at the end of the previous year, so I was like, everything had ended, you know.
Free and easy to move.
I was in a position where I could do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I made the call, got the job, went down there and met them.
And what exactly was that? Were you offered a job specifically, or
they had a person who was going to be a musician, singer, person, and for some reason he'd quit at the last minute because of other commitments and in his life, and so they were kind of like, we need to get somebody immediately. So the way that job works is, because it's not a show up to work and go home, it's show up to work and stay there for 6 months. So they need to see you, and they need to live with you for a few days and see, and they want to get you drunk.
Right.
And see if you turn into a massive asshole.
Yeah.
You know. So
find the edges.
It was go down there for a weekend and live with them and see if they like you. You know. And it wasn't so much about my skills as about my character and about my ability to exist in that community.
Sure.
So that was really interesting. I didn't fully, you know, I wasn't fully cognizant of that fact. When I went down there, I was like, I'm going down for a job interview in my mind, because I'd never done that before.
Yeah.
But by the end of it, I realised, all right, they were kind of checking you out all weekend to see if you
so
fit.
Did you feel like you weren't aware of that at the time?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm pretty naive sometimes.
Right,
I just walk into situations like...
It's a kind of a strength in a way.
See what happens. Yeah. I mean, well, ignorance is bliss, I guess. I'm glad, because I didn't think about it too much. I just went down there and gave it my best. You know, try to make them like me. I wanted the job. And, you know, ultimately... There was a moment where I had to go and meet the artistic director, who's an amazing lady called Firenze Gaudi. And when I met her, she's quite a scary lady in a way. She's very accomplished in her career, and she's Italian. She's a very strong character. And so it was quite daunting to meet her, because she didn't give me much indication that she liked me, right off the bat. Yeah. So she was like, well, okay, you know, sing something for me. So I'm in the big top with nobody else but the producer and the director.
Wow.
And she's like, go on then, sing something. So I sang Sit Down by James for some reason. I don't know why I sang that.
Interesting.
It's a pop song.
Yeah, I know it. I know the song.
It's a good song.
Yeah, it's a great song. Interesting.
Yeah, so I chose that. I guess because it's a big song.
Yeah.
And it's a big top. So there's an aspect to the circus life with the construction and deconstruction and the bonding experience that forges among the group, that by the end of a tour you're just a unit.
Right.
You're a well-oiled machine, and I've been doing this with this group now for it's my 4th year.
I didn't know it was that long.
It's a well-oiled machine.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a significant amount of time, isn't
it?
Yeah,
it's an amount of time to go through things with people and feel like a family, like a community,
right.
And to feel a degree of inner change.
Are there any parallels with being in the band and the circuit? Does it feel like that sense of just working closely with, getting that close?
Yeah, I mean, with my band now, we've been together for not quite 20 years, but close to 20 years, we realise just recently. Wow. And
congrats. And you've not killed each other. That's amazing.
Not killed each other, but then in recent years we haven't seen each other too much. So that's probably one of the reasons.
That's the secret.
But you know, it's a different bond. I think we've been together for a lot longer, and we have this shared connection of we've all invested in this music together, and the band becomes more than a name or an idea. It becomes this history that you share together, and it's not my band, it's our band. You know,
I heard this thing about a boat that was like, you know, you take out one bit of the boat, you put in a new bit, and then sort of after 20 years you're like, well, what's...
Oh, that's an old...
You know, but bands
Greek,
are...
It's an old Greek
That's
fable.
Right. That's right.
What was the name of the guy whose boat it was? It was a philosophical concept. Plato talks about it.
Right. It's like, you know, that concept of what is it that makes a thing, and a band's a really interesting one of that.
That's very true. I heard it from I was listening to a late night video about what is the universe, and it was going through our different conceptions from like Newton to quantum physics.
Right.
So it was going through all these evolutions, and they were talking about our own very bodies regenerate over different periods of time. So our skin regenerates on a kind of bi-weekly kind of thing, like every 2 weeks our skin changes, and it's not the same skin it was.
Yeah.
And then other parts of our body, even our organs, regenerate over time and change. Our cells break down, their new ones grow.
Yeah.
Our bones, it's like. So it begs the question: are you this? If what is you? If it's not the physical self, then what is it? You?
Yeah, my daughter Rosa has just started having those questions.
Great.
It's interesting to see her discover all that stuff. What I'm conscious of is I really want to be able to give some value to the people out there who are really wanting to live a more creatively fulfilling life. And just, number one, feel like they're not kind of qualified. And number two, feel like they don't have permission to.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone like that, do you think?
I think the most important thing to say to empower people to feel like they have a right to be creative is to say that it's not mysticism and alchemy. There is an aspect to inspiration that can feel a bit like that, but that's a different conversation, I think. But creativity to me is the process by which we create. And in itself, that's the thing that can be learned. I don't think it's something you wake up having necessarily, but if you desire to learn that and teach yourself how to be creative, then it's about establishing a process that works for you to realize something from an idea to a finished thing.
Interesting. So it can be completely subjective. It can be completely personal.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be a cookie cutter, predetermined.
I don't
idea.
actually have a set system. I just have a bunch of devices that I use. So, for example, if we were to whittle it down to creativity in terms of songwriting, for me. What I say is I never show up to the table to write with an empty page. I don't think empty pages makes good songs. So if you sit, because what happens is you'll sit there with a blank page and you'll stare out the window and you'll be like, you'll come up with something and you'll be like, that's rubbish.
Yeah.
So what I like to do is I come to the table with a metaphorical bag of ideas. They might be things that people have said, or it might be an image, or it could be anything. But
a little
I come
bit
to
of
the
a
table,
melody, just a
pieces
seed
of things,
some
but
kind.
also physical things, like
Right.
physical things on a page or images or something. And like we talked before about cinema, so I'm quite visual, and I like marrying image with sound, because inside of my head when I'm playing, I'm always seeing the movie of the song, and that's how I sing. That's where I go when I sing.
Are you a visual thinker, would you say?
Yeah.
Interesting. And what do you think it is that stops people feeling like they have permission to just try things until they discover a process like that?
I think it's a very human thing to look inwardly at the self, or to look into the mirror, should we say, and to devalue the self. I think we all have a little voice inside that's like...
Why do you think? Why
it's
do
a
you think
natural insecurity to think that what you're doing is not as good as what else is.
Is it an excuse, maybe? Is there an aspect of it where it's like, I'm not good at that, so I don't, there's safety maybe.
Sure.
Maybe you can protect yourself from
failing. You have to cultivate a kind of an inner self that is your own best friend and that has faith in you, and you have to have that voice and cultivate it and allow that to speak. You have to have faith in yourself and make that voice the loudest one inside your head.
What you've just said is very profound and very true, and I say profound because it's one of those sentences that you could gloss over and go, oh cool, I just need to have faith in myself. Like, let me just play the person who might be watching this, who's never yet written a song, never yet put the brush to the canvas, whatever. Cool, so I just have faith in myself. Cool, fine, whatever. You're a unicorn, I can't do that.
Yeah.
right?
But it's not true.
But it's not true. But if you were going to give someone like okay, here's a very specific example of how you could create more faith for yourself as a creative person, what would you say? How would you approach that?
Okay, so let's say you managed to write a song. So you've got a guitar, you've learned a few chords, and as soon as you learn a few chords, you know you've got the building blocks for a song, because all you need is 2 or 3 chords. In truth, you actually only need 1 chord to write a song.
Yeah.
If you're doing Mississippi Hill Country Blues.
Yeah.
But let's say you've got 3
or a
chords.
lot of reggae as well as
So you've got your 3 chords, you've written a few words, and you've sat down and sung a vague melody over it, and you're like, it's a song. And you kind of like it, but you also think it's a bit shit.
Yes.
Because you've got this voice in your head.
Yeah.
So I was there when I wrote that song about my sister. It's just something, I learned a few chords, I needed to write, it was what I was thinking about at the time. I wrote this song, I didn't think it was very good, I knew it, I tried to sing and I was like, it's not great, you know. But I met a bunch of people who were better than me at playing, and who had a car and were going to open mics and stuff. And I'd moved back to Scotland, so 7 months after going to my grandparents, I'd played the guitar, written the song, came back up, fell in with this bunch of people, and this guy Finn was like, get in the car, we're going to Glasgow, you're going to play at Blackfriars open mic tonight. And I was like, no. And he was like, put your name down, I've already told the guy you're playing.
Yeah.
And I was like, all the way there, I was like, I can't believe you've done this. No way. And all of the people getting on stage were much more accomplished than me. I went up there, I could barely hold the guitar, I was trembling. I got through the song. It was terrible.
Yeah.
I know it was terrible. There isn't a video of it, but if there was, you'd see how terrible it was. But what happened was, when I came off, the other musicians and the people there were like, nice, because they could see the effort.
Man.
They see that it was my first song. I think I got introduced as, this is his first song, and I was like, ugh. But they came up and they were like, well done, like, it takes a lot of bravery to do that. You've done it now, do it again. And for me, at that stage, I would never have put myself in that position. So
wow, so he was a good friend, it sounds like, in a way.
It broke the back of it, and from that point on, even though I wasn't very accomplished, I was writing my little songs and I was performing them regardless. So if you don't have a friend,
it's actually about, and that's a great point that people could really take a lot from, is like, I say this to people often, like, I'm not any different, I'm just willing to feel anything. I'm willing to go, and I still am willing to go on stage and say something or sing something that doesn't work, and I feel like I'm going to die.
How vulnerable is it to write a simple song? If you think about a Brian Wilson song, wouldn't it be nice if we were older? Then we wouldn't have to wait so long.
Something playing with fire simple, there. It's so simple.
So simple, and it's so hard to write something like that because you have to feel it.
Tom Petty as well, like, I won't back down, I'll stand my ground, I won't back down. But it's amazing.
To speak an honest word like that in simple language, and to sing it with no cringe or no... Right. It makes you feel incredible, you're very vulnerable to do that. Yes. And I always describe that type of songwriting as ultimate bravery,
Yeah.
Because when you start writing songs, what you'll find is you'll tend to cloud everything in imagery, and you'll hide from the truth, and you make it complex. Yeah. You come up with fancy chord structures and flowery words. Listen to a lot of, like a lot of cool indie bands. You're like, what is this song about? Don't get me wrong, I love it. It's cool stuff, but like, you don't know what they're saying.
They're not this is an interesting one actually, but what do you think about, I reckon the archetype, the songwriter is a thing, it is an archetype, and I think it's a bit different to the troubadour. I think it's a bit different to the poet. I think it connects to recorded music, right? You've never had a songwriter until you had recorded music. So you did have poets, you did have singers, you had folk singers, you had songwriters.
The concept of the song.
You had people who wrote songs and sung them, but it's so kind of connected to, like, even sheet music, right? Yeah. Some form of human beings being able to write something down and go, I own that, that's mine, that's what I'm getting behind, that's my identity. It's a kind of interesting phenomenon, the songwriter. It feels a bit different to other kinds of artistry in that way. And it is so personal. There aren't many, I suppose stand-up comedy. I love watching stand-up comedy, and I listen, hats off to anyone that can like, without, because I do jokes on the gig, but to then not have a guitar and just stand there with a mic, with a crowd full of people that half want to see you fail, is like, it's amazingly brave, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
But I suppose my point is maybe the songwriter and the comedian have more in common in the sense that you really are just saying, hey, this is me. Like, you know, I'm sad about my sister. I feel fucking shit about leaving her behind.
I mean, that story could be a stand-up comics thing if I could find a comedic hook.
Exactly.
But I, you know, at that time...
Well, they say comedy is tragedy plus time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So a comedian would turn that into something
Here's
funny.
a good one. They say comedians get into comedy because they want to control the reason why people laugh at them.
Right.
Can you relate to that one? I can. Like being the weirdo at school, playing a guitar, or a wee weird guy. Yeah. And now you're kind of like, you can be a cool one in society. Okay. You can control how people perceive it, right, as an adult. And I think that's why many of us that are performers do it.
It seems like a kind of power when you watch someone sing. And, you know, I'm a musician, but when I watch other people sing, I'm in awe of them, you know.
It's so weird.
What's amazing.
Remember we did that gig together at the Traverse, and I felt like that gig was a great example of that. I was like watching you, I was like, fuck, Toby's so cool, man. Look at him. He's so cool.
Always look at the musicians.
And it's like, it's that vice versa. It's such a funny thing, and we all do it to ourselves. But I guess it's important to say that just because it's like, it's not like you're going to get on a stage and feel like a unicorn and feel like you know exactly what you're doing and feel like you're the one. No. It's not the point. The point, and no one wants to see that anyway. It'd be boring. So often the people who are like the most unequivocally confident don't have that value that you really want to see. Sometimes the value is the humanity and the kind of like making the mistakes and just being a human on stage.
Vulnerability is something. I had a very strange experience the other night in the Royal Oak. I was sitting there playing and
in the Royal Oak, a strange experience. I can't imagine it.
I was just playing. I wasn't on the bill, you know, hired to play. I was just there playing for hours through the afternoon. And when it came time to the musician to come in and hand over, he sat down next to me. He's a nice guy, a guy that I know. He was a bit off that day, you know, and we traded songs, and it was quite a busy room, and I'd been getting the banter with some people that were there that were a bit drunk, and I was just taking it lightly and having a good time. It was all fine, but his comment brought home the difference between our inner world and our outer projection, because he turned to me at some point and he said, it just amazes me, Toby, how you always seem like you're completely in control, you know.
All right, yeah.
And I looked at him, I was like, what? Yeah. I was like, I'm glad it appears that way.
Right. It's like that, what's the one they say about the swan? They look graceful and under the water, it's just legs like kicking.
It just blew me away that he perceived me that way. And I thought, is it just because I've settled in here for loads of hours and I've had a couple of pints of Guinness and I'm a bit relaxed? But the idea that I would appear to be in control at all times is ridiculous to me.
But it's 30 years of like... sometimes I feel like I kind of love feeling weird. Do you know what I mean? Do you connect to that at all? And like when I do gigs, sometimes I'm like, this is so fucking weird, you know? Or like,
and in terms of, you mean the shit that's running through your mind?
Sometimes, and like, I don't know, just sometimes I'm like, is this even me? Like, what am I doing even? And then, but it feels so natural and so weird at the same time.
It's a strange thing that happens because you write your songs, right? But a lot of what we do is talking in between songs.
Right.
And I never ever have a script or a plan for that. It just happens. No.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't like to have a script.
And that sounds so scary to me.
Yeah, I just get up there.
You must have bits though that you kind of.
I have a few. Like sometimes I'm like, I'll tell them about this thing, or I know the songs I'm going to play, so I'm like, I've got a little anecdote to link this to that, and I like to give people context with the music, where appropriate. But I don't have set pieces that I do, so it's quite freewheeling, and But an amazing thing happens where there's this, you put yourself on the stage, and then when the song ends, you've got this next song, and then your brain is like overdrive, and it's like, and it's almost like that fight or flight moment where everything goes into slow motion, and you look at the crowd, and then you make a comment. It's like a stand-up comedian where you make a comment about somebody or something occurs, and you run with it, and then it turns into a bonding moment with you and the audience, because it's really, you know, because it can't be scripted, because it's really happening then.
Yes.
And that's what stand-ups use, isn't it? That's why they always chat to the crowd, because they want to make something happen between them and the audience, not just them standing doing their piece, you know?
I think that's always when it works best. When a gig works amazing is when it's like, it just feels like you're there and the audience is there and you're all having a night out and you're sharing it.
Yeah.
And I think when I was younger, it's really hard gigging in your early 20s, because you're just a wreck. You don't know what you're doing. And for me, I was also just really inexperienced. I just hadn't done enough of it. It takes a lot of it to get good at it.
Yeah.
And you learn, like I had to learn, this is going to sound almost stupid, but I had to learn how to like not be rude almost. Because it's like when you're in the moment and you're kind of just stressed and you're trying to do it all, it's like, think about when you're stressed in life, those are the moments where you say a stupid thing, right?
You put yourself down, or you can be flippant with the crowd.
That's a big one. Exactly. Yeah. That's a big... I'll see people do this in their early careers as performers, is like they kind of apologizing or slagging people in the crowd, things like that you're just stressed, right? It's just a stress response.
Probably shouldn't play this one. It's a bit half-boiled, but we'll give it a try, you know.
Not a great energy. But we all have to, in a way, go through it, right? Or like tuning for 5 minutes.
Every time I see someone do that, and I've done it, and I would say even on occasion I might find myself still doing it now, because we're all human, you know. You do it, and then afterwards you're like, I shouldn't have said that.
And
why did I do that? We're all prone to a moment of insecurity, so that's just what happens, and you just have to be like, well, do better, you know. Yeah,
and you have to learn how to, like, it's almost like Aikido, a gig, in the sense that you're like, okay, I got punched in the face by myself, but I have to just get on with it. And I think the trick is,
much as I said, not necessarily having a script, but to actually look into the moment ahead of time and see it coming. And be slightly prepared for it, so that you catch yourself if you're going to have a moment of weakness, and you're like, no, I've prepared for this.
Yep.
I know that this is going to... Don't just walk in and don't think about anything.
Yeah.
It's like when you see someone start singing and they're kind of off in Neverland, and then they just start strumming and saying words, and it's like, you're not in the song right now. And I get that with from teaching people. I'll be like, play me a little thing, and they'll just start playing. And I'll be like, what are you thinking about? And they'll be like, I don't know, like a G chord. And I'm like, nah, what's the song about? And they'll be like, it's about love. And I'll be like, yeah, it's about love. And then I did this with a student recently. I was like, okay, it's a song about love. It's a song about like desperate love, isn't it? It's desperate love. And he's losing her. And I was like, have you ever had a really amazing girl? And he's like, yeah. I was like, did you lose her? He's like, yeah. I was like, think about that.
Right. Be there. Be in it.
Just do that. Just make it yours, and then, you know.
It's a great point, because I think it can be tough as time goes on. That's the other thing as a songwriter. You're an actor, really. You write something, you know, you're going to feel totally different about a song about your sister now than you did then. You're going to feel totally different about a song about a relationship that you're not in. But every time you get on stage is like you have an opportunity to find the emotional state that song pointed towards, right? And that's your work in many ways, is kind of conjuring emotion in the moment.
What we're talking about here in terms of creativity is your ability to have some sort of creative output in whatever your medium is. So for me, that little song that I started with about my sister, I probably wouldn't want to hear it right now. But it has immense value to me, because it meant I had something to go to that open mic with and be terrible with and learn from. And it was a stepping stone to other songs. No creative act is devoid of any value. regardless of
It's
the value
such a
you
great
may
point.
place upon it, and regardless of the
Yeah.
value the world may place upon it,
It's
or
a
a
great
university assessment may place upon it, that the value is in the doing, the process, you know, and that's what creativity is. It's a process. It's not a thing that begins and ends. It's a thing that begins and never ends. It's like you know, like when I was a kid, I felt creative. Probably was because when you're a child, your mind is less clouded by all of the stuff that the world throws at you, you know. And the older you get, you have to fight for your creativity to retain your childishness, your playfulness.
Well, and I think the way that you do that is you're explaining that very eloquently. It's a great point. Is like, it's what you make your failures mean, because there's a great, I can't remember, it might be another Stoic quote about that to a Stoic philosopher, the bad day is wood chippings on the carpenter's floor. Right? Now, to the songwriter, that open mic, that moment changed your life.
Yeah.
What anyone could look at in a way as a kind of objective failure, right? For me, I did a concert. I got hired to do a Burns concert when I was 18, and I knew one Burns song, and I was drunk in a pub, and someone saw me and they thought, he's great, because I was giving it loudly. I'd had a few pints. They booked me for it, and I showed up, and it was in Livingston, and there was like a couple there who were doing Burns poetry readings, who had been, clearly it was like Sally and Jimmy that have done it for 50 years, and they know every bit of Burns. I walked in there, I looked at them, I thought, oh boy, this is bad. You know, I had one song I'd written, I knew 2 Paolo Nutini songs, and I had one Burns song, and I sung them, and then I just said, guys, I'm so sorry, I don't know why I'm here, just ask for your money back, have a great night. I left, and I got on the bus, and I went home. And it's like, was that a failure? Of course it was, but something in me, for some reason, decided a couple of weeks later to go and do a gig again, right? Because I knew there was something in it for me.
Yeah.
And I think that's the bit of it that if people can just get, that if you can have that moment, it's not like having that moment will stop you. That moment will actually start. That's the start, right?
Yeah. It's, I mean, if there's anybody out there who's just starting playing or has like got a few songs but they've not played out, and just get this idea out of your head that it's ever going to be perfect. Every gig you play has got some hurdle to overcome, and that's part of the journey. Is how you deal with these little moments. Nothing is a failure if your reaction to it is in accordance with the moment.
Yeah.
So another example of that would be Black Diamond Express, first gig. I was at uni. I got asked. I had the idea for the band. I had the name. I had the aesthetic. I had a few songs. I knew the people I wanted to ask to be in it, but I didn't have a band. And somebody at uni said, "Oh, we've got this concert at the Bongo Club coming up. Do you have a band?" And I was like, "Yes, I do. The Black Diamond Express."
Right.
So I booked the gig. It was a couple of months away. I then arranged a rehearsal, got the band together, and then told them that we had a gig.
Perfect.
And then we did
Yeah.
it. And at that first gig, I had bought this fancy Elvis-style microphone that I thought was really cool. Absolute piece of crap.
Yeah.
And during the gig, we were playing our big song, Live Free or Die, an original, you know. And during the first, there's like 3 verses that build into a midsection that builds to a climax. So during that 3-verse build-up period, the microphone turned and flopped and busted, and the cable needed changed, and it was a sold-out bongo. The sound engineer was through the crowd at the other end. He realized he needed to change the mic lead, and it was going to take a minute. So I turned around to the band, I looked at the drummer, and I was like, "Don't stop playing." And they were like, "Right." So they kept going.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Right, what am I going to do?" So I turned my back on the audience, took a big deep breath, and then I went to the front of the stage, and I started banging out that 3rd verse to take us to the next section, just like on the edge of the stage, like shouting. Yeah. And they'd seen things going wrong, and they knew it was all like, what's going to happen? So they were watching, like, what's he going to do? When I started singing, they were like, "Oh," there was a vibe in the room, and they were like, "Oh." And then by the time I'd finished that verse, the guy had fixed the mic. I got back on it, and the place went mental.
Because that's like why we go to gigs. We don't go to see a mechanical perfect.
Yeah.
We want it. This is the point. Is like, don't be afraid of the vulnerability, because it's Those are the moments
I
you remember.
could have stopped. I could have been like, sorry guys, we've got a problem. You know, that would have like completely destroyed the energy of the moment.
Yeah.
It's like something went wrong. Carry on.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
keep
yeah.
going. Never stop, you know.
How would you define the difference between, because this is one I think a lot of people get tripped up on, inspiration and creativity? What's the difference, if there is one?
Yeah, I think there's a clear delineation between those two. So as I said earlier, I think creativity is very much a process that's acquired and learned over time through your own endeavors. It doesn't have to be a set process, but there is a mechanism there where you could define that, and you could do a PowerPoint about that. But inspiration is this thing that happens that's more like a state of mind, a state of being. And you know, when people talk about the muse, this idea of something outside of yourself that descends to you.
A gift of sorts.
A gift, yeah, exactly. So the idea of Paul McCartney waking up and writing Blackbird, going back to bed.
Right.
That kind of flash of inspiration.
Yeah.
So I'd like to sort of, in a way, demystify that a little bit, because it's not like, you know, a gift from God that only some can receive. Anybody could have that, but you need to be present and aware that that moment is happening. It's a little bit like you're half awake and you're half dreaming, and you don't want to move too suddenly or you'll fully wake up. Mm-hmm. And so when you feel inspiration happening, you've got a sense of what you want to say, what you want to create. You've got a sense of what you're doing, and you need to continue doing what you're doing very gently. Gently, gently, slowly, slowly catch a rabbit. That's how I feel like real inspiration is for me. And I became more aware of it in recent years. And when I feel it happening, I don't think about what I'm doing. I don't remember anything I learned at uni. I don't remember what I read somewhere. I don't think about my taxes.
Yeah.
I try to stay with that moment, that little tingle in the air. It feels like something's drifting down through the sunlight, and it's just here, and you can't reach out and grab it. You have to keep your hands here and let it just drift down. But the thing I do is I've asked it, where do you want to go?
That's a great question.
Not where do I want to take it with my conscious mind. It's more of a subconscious filtering through of like, where does it want to go? The thing that's not you, you know, something slightly beyond, something out of your reach. And if you're very gentle with it, it'll give you something really unusual that you would never have thought of. So that's how I describe it. I know it sounds a bit ephemeral.
It's like a surrender in a way, right?
It is. It's a trusting, yeah.
And do you ever experience when you're recording, I feel like it's like that moment can happen where you're like, oh, this is it. This is the moment, and it's here, and it's like, then it goes, and it's like you try and play the song again, and it's like, it's not there.
You could do 20 more takes. And
you could, and they would be. Here's the weird thing: you could do. Let's just say, I was doing a take of a song. That moment comes. I could do another take of the song, and it could be kind of exactly the same, but there's just a sort of, just a really subtle but perceivable difference in those two takes, in that one of them has a presence that you don't know why. It's not more in time, it's not more in tune, it's not faster, it's not slower, there's nothing you could like point at other than just a feeling or a knowing.
It's an internal thing. I believe it's a stopping thinking. I think when you stop thinking, you're just doing. And it happens quite by accident when you're recording, I think, because you've got so many considerations and preparation, and then the moment comes and you commit to that moment, and it occurs, and you know it's occurred. And then it's gone. You can't stay in that state. It's not a state you can live in.
It's like a river. It's like it's gone.
Yeah.
It's fascinating, man. But that's why if anyone who's interested in kind of seeing that in action, what I would always recommend is go and listen to the outtakes from albums that you love, of the songs that you love played an alternative take, and it can honestly just be, you're like, I don't know why that isn't the one. It's so fascinating. And I think, especially in a band, you have to get everyone at the same time to have that moment. And that's a really kind of, a really, really special thing. You know, when you're locked in with like 4 people having that kind of moment together, it's an amazing thing. But it is, so maybe part of what you're saying there that's important for people to understand is, if you're not having that moment, it doesn't mean anything's wrong. Doesn't mean you can't work on your process. Doesn't mean you can't prepare for more of those moments, because in many ways the work of being a songwriter is to be prepared for when they come. And if you have the skill sets, it's like fishing, right?
Yeah.
You know, if you know how to put the line on, put a fly on, wheel it in effectively, you've got a chance.
Yeah.
But you might sit there for 3 hours and nothing happens, but you don't then go, I'm the worst fisherman that ever lived.
No, you
I'm
just
never
went
coming
fishing.
back. Yeah, you just went fishing.
I mean, I've been to the studio and been fishing and come back with no catches before.
Right.
I've still had a physical thing at the end of it, but I know that
It's not
they weren't the definitive moments for me. But you still go through the process, and you get better at it, and you try to create the situation where those moments are allowed to occur. Whether that's an external preparation and or an internal preparation, probably both. You know.
How important do you feel like the people you're with are in that regard when you're making a record, say?
Very important. I think their energy they bring into the room, and their demeanour, and their punctuality, and their commitment to the work, professionalism, is 100% what it's about.
It's so true. It's so true, and it's like it's one of the myths that I would love an opportunity to almost talk to more, is this myth of musicians being like lazy, wake up at 1. It's like maybe the loser ones that you've met, but a lot of the musicians I know are some of the most disciplined people you'll meet, because only you can make that sequence of events occur. Or, as you said more eloquently, only you can put yourself in the environments where you have a chance of them happening. Yeah. So I would argue in some ways that self-employed, self-generated path requires more discipline in some ways.
It requires a lot of discipline to continue playing your instrument, you know, for years and years and years, and continue to try to evolve and get better at what you do. So that's like a martial art in itself, you know.
Right.
I think I see the guitar as a martial art. Really.
That's cool. And like, do you see the creative process also as a martial art? Like, how would you think of that?
I guess the creative process could be described more like working out at the gym. It's like a muscle that you flex. Right. So obviously, the way muscles work is if you use them, they grow. Right. And so that's a little different. Because I see that as potentially the creative process could be more mechanical. You could have like a process.
Can be administrative.
I do it this way. Yeah, I do it this way. Or I have a few different approaches that I use, you know, which is probably more like how I actually do it. I have a few devices that I bring into my process that might be effective.
Right. Tools.
And they give me a chance. Yeah.
It's more mechanical.
Exactly. Yeah. Inspiration is that more ephemeral, spiritual, almost state of being. And then the instrument itself is the training and the discipline to have the bedrock there to play with, because the more accomplished you are on your instrument, the more expressive choices you can make.
And your boxing match or your martial arts match is the open mic, right? When you go out there, it's like, okay, cool, you did your practice in your nice little cozy room, but now your hands are shaking and you're sweating.
Exactly.
So can you do it now?
Your training has to be as close to 100% as possible, because at the gig you are never going to be 100%.
That's a great
There's so many variables.
point. Yeah.
It was actually a producer that said that to me once. He was like, you need to be 100% prepared for the studio, because you're only ever going to function at 70% in the studio.
Yeah, on a good day.
And that's like, okay. So if your preparation sucks and you go in there, what chance have you got?
I love it. I love it. Well, listen, Toby, I really appreciate that you came round and made the time to have this
Thanks,
chat,
Adam.
and I think that's going to be helpful for a lot of people, honestly.
I hope so. If they can take any inspiration from my failures, that would give me a lot of pleasure.
Is it inspiration or is it discipline that they need? What would you say?
I would say discipline would be the more important of the two. Inspiration will come if you're showing up, every day. So just stick in there and work as hard as you can at it, and give yourself a fighting chance.
Beautiful.
Just like to say thanks for inviting me to chat, and I hope
it's
it's
a pleasure,
helpful to somebody out there.
It's a pleasure. Where can people find your stuff? Where can people see what you're up to and catch you at a gig?
You'll see me around Edinburgh for a little while. I'm going to be away in the summer with the circus for my final tour with them.
Final one.
Final one. I'm going to step away after this year. 4 years on the road with those guys. It's been like a transformative experience. And they're going to start a new show next year, so I'm going to step away after this one and follow some musical avenues of my own and put my creativity to use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that feels like a natural time for you to, because it's a constant balance. That's another thing I'd love to say as well, just before we finish, and I think it's something that probably is valuable and important, and something that I reckon you can resonate with is, it's another myth maybe to speak to, is people thinking if you do music that it's just easy to make space for it. Where actually it's about having faith, it's about being committed to it, and it's about when you have a kid or when you have another job you're doing to provide, or you're doing a different project, it's about you have to make space for it, right?
Yeah.
And there's seasons where you have to make space for it, and I think a lot of people imagine that it's just something that you have or you don't have, maybe.
Yeah, it's a lot of music takes place in bars and clubs, right? So people and I know there are a lot of musicians out there who drink a lot, and so it can be very easy to fall into some pretty bad habits, and not look after yourself. And I know a lot of people struggle with their mental health in general. So if you're going down that road, that's something to be wary of, like you're going to be in bars and clubs, and like over the years, I've had a lot of friends struggle with it. I've been fortunate enough in my life to navigate that reality and to not be an alcoholic at any point, you know. The older I get, the more interested I am in self-care and self-management and looking after myself and living a good life whilst being a creative person who happens to sing and play guitar in these environments, So it's kind of quite the opposite for me these days,
That's a really interesting one, because it's like, I want to do this, so I want to be healthy so I can keep doing this, right?
Well, back in the 60s, I kind of grew up with that image of the rock star or the folk star or whatever, but they were all like smoking blow and getting wasted and taking drugs, and that was the model that was presented to us as an icon. They've
not slept well and they're just eating a burger. And
Keith Richards kind of thing, It's like, that's of no interest to me, So that's why I say I treat it more like a martial art, because it's more about
staying
like
sharp.
A healthy body, a healthy mind. I want to be as sharp as possible when I play,
Well, Toby, it's been a pleasure. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of your day. Cheers, man. Appreciate it. Good to see you. Cheers for coming. I hope you loved that episode. If you would like to get access to hours and hours of exclusive content just like this, plus a whole community where I'm in touch with everyone on the WhatsApp and we're all keeping each other accountable and living a more creatively fulfilling life, all for the low cost of $1.50 a month, click the link in the top comment and come and join the club today. Have a fantastic day. Cheers.